While reading the novel Life of Pi, you're taken on this incredible journey of a young boy named Pi surviving a terrible shipwreck, then somehow living for 227 days in a small lifeboat, along with several wild animals, and then ultimately alone with a deadly Bengal tiger. But then in the book's final few pages, after Pi tells the story to some investigators, they respond how maybe most objective observers would. They tell him that none of that could possibly have been true, that they don't believe him. So they demand he start again, and this time tell them the truth. So then Pi relates another story, an arguably more terrifying one, a story of surviving the shipwreck along with his mother, a sailor, and the ship's cook, and how the cook killed the others in his cruelty, and how Pi had to eventually kill the cook. And the investigators are horrified, wondering if this is the real story. But then Pi says something so fascinating, because he doesn't say anything to the effect of, "There you go, you got the real story out of me now, I hope you're happy." No, instead he asks them quietly, "Now which story do you prefer?" With the book ending there with no further clarification, it is reasonable for the reader to wonder, well, which version of events was true? But how the book is implying that should be answered is really interesting, and I believe ultimately why this whole thing was written in the first place. Because look, Pi has always had an odd relationship with the idea of a singular defined truth. One example is with his very name. His name was originally Piscine after his uncle's favorite pool. But when that name got picked on at school, he decided to rewrite his own narrative. He did that by coming to school having memorized every number of pi, writing it all on the chalkboard, and recreating the mythology behind his name, now being known as not Piscine, but Pi, the local school legend. That is, he was not satisfied with the outcomes of his prior name story, and so he decided to write a new one. Also, in his childhood, we read about how he was at first only Hindu and found power in those teachings, but then also converted to Christianity and Islam as well after seeing truth in those ideas. And to the confusion of many, he proceeded to try and practice all three religions at once, ignoring supposed contradictions in doing that, because this kind of faith that he created was what he found to most effectively give him meaning in life. This is the story he wanted to tell himself. So what we might get from all this and other examples is that Pi is uniquely in tune with the power of narratives and stories to uplift, to inspire, to give meaning to our lives. But he places his faith less in this idea of rigid factuality or correctness, and more in exploring which stories are most able to have an impact. And in that lens, the ending of the book takes on an interesting interpretation. Because imagine if you were Pi, and you just had a scarring and horrifying 227-day journey, and then had the option to believe in one of these two versions of the truth. If you were in that situation, I want you to ask yourself, which story would you want as your memory? The story of surviving the odds, rising to the challenge, facing miracles, and befriending a tiger? Or the story of a vile man mercilessly, cruelly enacting horrors before your eyes? Which of these stories would give you hope? Which of them would build you up? Which of these would give you the energy, the might to pull yourself together and keep going in your life? And so which of these, when pushed and asked for it, would you claim was the truth? Personally, when it comes to what events actually happened, I lean towards the shorter story, the one without the animals, being what actually happened on the boat to Pi. But see, the book is making the point that it does not matter what actually happened. What matters is how you choose to remember it. And that's not just about the story, it's a lesson for our lives in general. When we think about our own pasts, our own stories, we know our memories are sometimes flawed, hard to verify, but when we look back on our pasts and our memories, how do we choose to remember them? That is, what stories do we decide to tell ourselves, at times independent of verifiable truth? And ultimately the story is asking us to wonder how those choices are a reflection, maybe, of how we decide to lead our lives. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.